Yeah, I'm never.
I would say probably, I would do, right now, the repairs, they don't count.
My minimum square foot is 4,000 square feet. I don't do that.
I do tear downs, I do have tear downs.
Yeah.
I've got the whole thing tear down.
Yeah. It's the last one I did. Seen it. Still now. And this well, my center is I'm trying to shoot for the 4 5. I've got a nice,
That was definitely
it's on 60 by 125. Tough to build down. There's no piece of park. My guys complain about it. I haven't worked in Santa Monica in 9 years. He started sourcing plants. Yeah, usually oh, 8, 9, 10. You survived that years. Good news was I paid up on my 20 cents. Always over these levels. Every moment, really trying to do the tools. Took a year off for a book.
All through the best. This is real fast.
Yeah.
My clientele. It's always full, no, I don't advertise. Actually, I'm on the radio right now, and I don't have my one.
Really?
Because I did this house. Just a fire repair.
Yeah.
He's the young station. I don't know, it's not really advertising.
Mine is strictly my science.
Calls, I get lots of calls now. My room here in the house, no.
We don't put it up. The lot's flat. And when the house is all framed up, take it down. I'm not interested in trying to get tired of looking at these design that. Not that transparent.
People call me up to actually, a lot of the subs that for work and stuff, so.
Yeah.
They go get a second impression, somebody just out of the blue.
Yeah. It's not like somebody's been with me 20 years.
I've had subs, my demo guys been with me since, probably 86. Framer, used to work with my friend, just because he's 86.
When did you start doing it?
I got licensed in 86 general contractor. I got an A&B.
I started in Trump, opened up offices in Vancouver, Seattle, here, Honolulu, by 1980. 70 employees for the rest of the state. But they're all project commissions. I'm operating, I'm running out of cameras.
I hit everyone with jobs that you want. Organizer, supervisor.
Well, that's what saved my HVAC.
Yeah.
John Cronin, because my family's totally not. He just did this issue.
You can't do this when my son.
Fly to the end. So the whole thing's completely tracked. I would be fine.
This is the third, I think, our second meeting.
So I saw some mistakes. Trucks there. So I had flying around. Turn on pulling it. I'll show you. Always something.
Now it's scheduled to straps.
I've often done 5 minutes.
Yeah, we were there.
There's not expecting now as well.
Yeah.
To get up there, introduce you, bring it. Just for what? I'm 73.
I have a good contract report about the city of. They've had a whole series.
Anyway, his luck was I thought he was making I have baby to work. I had 35 hours. Imagine.
Yeah, they did that.
Bought a bunch of gas stations. She had lucky idea in her cabin. But she was still up to big house. Golf signs.
This one is being one.
So everything up in Chicago. Especially burgers. Yeah. But that's a movie. Hopefully, Carl's 62. Sold out. He didn't need any questions. So he had 20.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right? All right. My name is Josh Kerpies. I'm the district director for Assemblymember Richard Bloom, and I just wanted to come and say thank you for being here. We've worked closely with the City of Malibu and the Contractor State License Board, along with Senator Stern's office, to put this event together, and the County of Los Angeles Department of Public Works. So we're so happy to see you come this morning, and we hope that this will serve as a resource. We'll provide some information to you, or the agencies will provide some information to you, but it's really about any questions that you have that either you brought today with you or that come up during the discussion. This is an opportunity to get those answered, get those questions answered, and it's one small thing that our office is a part of to help bring state resources to Malibu and the surrounding areas that were affected by the fires. So I want to thank you for being here this afternoon. We're going to have another similar workshop for property owners that were affected by the fires. But we wanted to also meet with you this morning too, because I know that a lot of you have been or will be doing work out in this area. And so we wanted to make sure that you have the resources available and get your questions answered. I want to I want to just let you know that Steve Lane from Senator Stern's office is with us this morning as well in the back of the room. And also wanted to point out Tim Pershing from the Assemblymember staff is here with us. Many of you know Tim, that if you work out in this area, he handles most of our Santa Monica Mountains area in Malibu. He lives in Topanga, so many of you know him already. And then out front, you saw Melissa Koffler, who is also a field rep in our office, who has been the person really organizing this event. So thank you. If you have any questions for us throughout the entire day, we will be around. But right now, I want to introduce Councilmember Skylar Peak from the city of Malibu. Malibu has been the council and the mayor and the city manager have just been true leaders for their community in getting us through this the devastation of the fire, and they have been an amazing partner and opened up their city halls for us today to do this and provide this opportunity for you. And right now, I want to see if Councilmember Skylar.
Okay, no worries,
like
Josh. All good.
Thank you.
First off, I want to thank Andrew and the rest of our staff and all the staff. Julie, hello, good morning. Thank you for coming down on Saturday. Or what day is it? Yeah, Saturday. And as a councilman, I know that there's a lot of work here to be done in our community. And as a contractor, I'm kind of going to go sit in the same seat as you guys today and learn. So I appreciate all of you for being here. I know that there's a lot of information that'll be helpful to everyone today. And I thank all of the staff on behalf of the rest of the council members, the mayor and mayor pro tem, for the state's offices for putting this on today. So I know there's a lot of different information and stuff out there, and it's kind of a learning thing. And there's a lot of people that are busy on the weekend that can't always make it down here. So I appreciate you guys coming, and I'd like to thank the members of the staff of the Contractors State License Board for being here. So thank you. And if you get done with this and want to have some fun, pop up to the Shoemash Day event at Bluffs Park. And there's parking right down on the lot on the left when you get out of here. So thank you very much. Thank you, Tim. And thank Senator Stern, all of his staff, and Richard's staff for doing this. I'm very grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Rick Lopes from the Contractor State License Board, and I too want to thank you for making the investment of being here with us this morning. I know we did get started a few minutes late, but as contractors, we gave you a little window. We're gonna be there and start within a certain time. But we've got a lot of information. Our real goal here today is to try to prevent any issues or problems before they happen. As you well know, nobody knows better than you. Construction, rebuilding, building, it all is a very complex with lots of moving pieces. We want to make sure that you've got the information you need to make sure everything that in regards to your license is in place. You got the proper insurance, the bonds. Maybe you're looking to expand the company, hire a salesperson or employees for the first time. We're going to talk about those basic things that you need to have in place. But we do want to start this morning by talking about specifically what is going on here in Malibu. Make sure you understand the process with the building department, with all the different agencies that are going to be working with you as you take on jobs here. So we're going to go through our agenda here, and we're going to start off with Andrew Sheldon from the city of Malibu. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. All right. Great. So I want to begin by explaining to everybody that the Woolsey fire area actually spans two different jurisdictions. It spans the unincorporated portion of Los Angeles County and the city of Malibu. So for purposes of what you as contractors are going to be involved in, that's important to know because you're dealing with pulling permits from either County of LA Building Department. Their office is located up in Calabasas on Old Agoura Road, or City of Malibu. Our building department is located here at Malibu City Hall. There's folks from the county coming today to speak about the county jurisdictional process. My role today is to tell you a little bit about the city's process. There's a lot of things in common between the two because it's essentially, you've got planning, clearance, and zoning issues. Conceptually, you have building plan check, conceptually the same, pulling permits, conceptually the same. But there are nuances and differences between how the county does things and how the city does things. So it's important to be mindful of that. The talk I'm giving this morning is really a condensed version of a presentation that we've given here at City Hall to design professionals and to residents on two separate occasions that covers both the planning and zoning process as well as the building safety plan check process. So I'm going to sort of, I'm with the building department, so I'm going to do my best to cover the planning and zoning issues. I may not be able to answer every question you might have, but try me and I'll do the best that I can. So essentially, what we've got in rebuilding fire damaged properties is a three-step process. The first step is, what can I build? And the way we look at that is through the planning and zoning. You begin talking to a planner here at City Hall to show them what you had before, what you want to replace there, and whether it's in like kind replacement or something new or different or what have you. The second step in the process is, how can I build it? That is where you get into the building plan check process, drawing up plans, geotechnical reports, agency reviews. So your plans then get routed around to our engineers for building plan check to look at the structural and geotechnical issues, as well as the environmental health department, which is looking at wastewater management. I don't know if everyone knows this already, but most homes in the city are on on-site wastewater treatment systems or septic systems. It's a more common term. So the capacity of those is usually set in place, and we're actually allowing people to reuse existing septic systems in most cases with the rebuilds, but that requires us to know something about what's there and its capacity. you'll have to deal with geology and geotechnical issues for foundation design, and you'll have to deal with the fire department on fire department issues, which are going to cover both the fire flow issue, having adequate resources to fight fire in the future, sprinklers, and also fuel modification. I'm going to get into a little bit more detail on each of these things as I go through this morning, but that's the second step, is the how can I build it? The third step is where the contractors come in. Construction. That is, once you have approved plans from that second step and the first step, coming in to the building department and pulling your permits. For the city, I have with me today one of our permit technicians, Julie Bauer. She's in the back in the red shirt. And she's going to help me through specific questions you might have on pulling different specific types of permits. But in general, I think everyone's aware in Malibu, it's a difficult process to get plans approved. So as contractors, we really want you first and foremost to be aware that you need approved plans to pull the permits to rebuild the homes. There have been some limited repair permits issued for singed windows and eaves and stuff like that that we've already let out the door. But basically, we're obligated to hold the line on issuing new building permits for certain things to happen first, not just to have your plans approved, but also for the debris from the burned down houses to be removed in a way that meets the requirements set for us by LA County and the state. So that's sort of the three steps. What can I build? How can I build it? And construction. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on each one. The city here in the planning department has really done an excellent job of trying to simplify what's usually a very complicated and drawn out process of getting a planning clearance to even get your plans into plan check. What they've done essentially is, if the homeowner or property owner, in case there's a transaction, wants to replace essentially in like kind what they had, plus up to 10%, it's going to be a very, very simple process, and it's going to accelerate things tremendously. Normally in the city, you go through a 2-loop process where you go out to all the agencies for review, meaning your fire, your geology, environmental health, et cetera, in the planning stage, and then you go back around that loop again in the plan check stage. What they've done with this condensed procedure for the like kind replacements is to make it one loop. That's going to save people a lot of time and get you guys as contractors out there sooner building homes for our residents, which is our goal here, is to really make this as easy and quick as possible to get people back into their homes. For people who want to add something additional, there's a few different variants of this, and I'm not going to get into the weeds here, but there's a way to kind of preserve that core like kind replacement and then put the additional things like a new swimming pool or an accessory dwelling unit on a second track, so you can kind of track two projects together. That's going to be also a nice way to get people out the gate to begin building that primary structure back. And then finally, if somebody wants something entirely different, say it was, a 2,000 square foot house, but it's a large lot, not a lot of constraints, owner can come in for a coastal development permit, which would basically set them up to build a much larger house, change the grading, retaining walls, driveways, you name it. But that essentially is putting you back into the normal process. So all these accommodations we're making for the rebuilds, in a sense, go away, and you're back to looking like any other developer who wants to, or homeowner who wants to do a big project on the property. So that's planning. I do want to say, if you're working with an owner through this process, you want to come in and meet early with our planning department. We have a planning rebuild counter open every day during normal city hall operating hours upstairs. That's step one. Get in the door and start talking to them. They will work with you to get you set up to meet with the outside agencies and departments to go over the things like septic system capacity, fire department requirements, geology foundation requirements, and get your team coordinated early. It is important to coordinate all these different activities because it's like a Rubik's Cube. What one department wants, you make that change, it may take something else out of conformance that was met before you made that change. So having a design professional that has a good handle on the coordination of all the different professionals involved between the structural engineer, the geotechnical, septic system consultant, if there's any biology issues, all these things have to work together. So our planning department is going to get you set up early on to make sure you understand how all those pieces fit together. Okay, I want to move into building plan check and then on to pulling permits. So for plan check, we do have to remove that debris first. So I don't know if any of you as contractors have been involved in the debris removal. Eric Rodriguez from LA County is going to be here a little later. If he's not here already, I don't see him, to explain more about that process. But essentially, there is a process in place and a permit is needed to remove that debris. Asbestos testing the soil for other contaminants is required to get through that process, and it requires a work plan and a permit and an inspection. So important for everybody to understand that no building permits are actually going to be issued for these rebuilds until all that is done in accordance with your approved work plan. Restoring power to the site. We have folks who maybe there was a primary structure and a guest house and one or the other burned down. Edison came out and pulled the meters off everything immediately after the fire. So for people who want to get back onto their property, reoccupy the guest house, we have a procedure in place at City Hall. You come to our public counter for building permits and we will get you set up with getting a clearance with Edison back to put that meter back in and any repairs needed. So if you had damage to your service panel or you had damage to any of the wiring on the customer side, getting that restored with permits and inspections. And then temporary housing. The city has set up procedures for folks who want to live on the property while they're going through this process to get the permits to rebuild and even through rebuilding. And again, come to City Hall, we'll walk you through that process. We have a planning clearance and a building safety permit to get you into a temporary home, which could be an RV, it could be a manufactured home. If it's something else, we'll want to look at what the unit is and work with you on getting all the approvals you need to have that in place. And then finally on to building plan check. So with this accelerated planning process, as I said, you may get out of planning sooner than you would have in the past. And what we want to do is make sure that once you're in plan check, you're coordinated. So all of your design professionals, as I said, should be coordinated by one lead person. Typically the architect, but not necessarily so, is going to make sure all these moving parts are moving together and in synchronization so that you're going to come out of this with a set of plans that's approved by our plan check consultants, the structural and mechanical, electrical, et cetera, plan checks. That set of plans, once it comes back with that plan check stamp, still needs to go around and get an environmental health stamp on it. It needs to get a geology stamp on it. It needs to get a public works stamp on it and a fire department stamp. So having everything in place so that your plans have met the requirements of all those different agencies is key, because that permit is not going to be issued until all those stamps are on your plans. Finally, to permit issuance, once you've got those approved plans with clearances from all the city departments and outside agencies, you come to our building safety counter, speak with a permit technician. Normally, if it's, if you're building a whole new house, that's going to be an appointment they're going to make with you to pull the permits in the afternoon and sit down and work through your fees, all of your building permit application information, and get those permits issued to you. Sometimes it's a sequencing of permits. If there's grading, for example, we may issue the grading permits before the building permit, and so on. But in any case, if you have further questions on that, we're going to be available at the end to answer that. And then just finally, I wanted to give you guys some statistics on where we're at so far in the rebuild process. We have, in planning, so far issued 47 clearances for that initial fast track planning verification that I mentioned. And we have issued a total of 8, what we call APR or administrative plan review clearances for more complicated projects. So as you see the relative numbers there, you can see that it's going to be a much faster process if you keep your aspirations moderate and go for that like-kind replacement. As far as building safety, we've issued 2 single-family rebuilds so far. So those are folks whose homes burned down. They now have permits and are rebuilding them. We had 2 single-family residences under construction, and sadly they burned down during the fire, and they're now permitted with rebuilds. 1 converted accessory structure, 1 deck repair, and 6 minor repairs. So those are our statistics. Obviously, we have a long way to go, and folks are right now still going through that plan check and zoning clearance process. So we want to do everything we can to make those early processes go quickly so we can get you, the contractors, lined up for permit issuance. And just a reminder to everybody, probably doesn't need to be said, but we want you to get your permits before you start building. We have issued a couple of stop work notices already for people who got ahead of themselves. So we have a code enforcement staff here and a vigilant community who doesn't hesitate to pick up the phone when something's happening they think doesn't have permits. So just want to remind everybody what they already know, that those approved plans and permits are a necessity. Are we taking questions now or saving them to the end?
You can go now.
Okay, all right. So I see one gentleman has his hand raised in front of me.
Approximately, what's the number of homes that were affected in the mountains area?
In terms of total loss, I think, Julie, was it 460? Yeah, there was, depending on which way you counted it, went up or down by a few, but about 460 homes lost.
And that's just in the city.
Just in the city. So,
Your definition of like kind, is that by square footage or by style?
it's by square footage, height, and location on the lot. They're accommodating some shifts, but it does not need to meet the same architectural style. So you can go from a pitched roof to a flat roof. You know, you can go from Mediterranean to modern, things like that.
Talk to them a little bit about like height stuff, because I know that that's something that concerns a lot of people. When houses go over a certain height, it kind of has another level of review.
Right. So, and this is getting into planning, but if I have my notes right here, which I don't, Skylar, you may be able to help me, but I think it's 18 feet is sort of the key threshold.
Yeah, just when you guys are building a house and the house is over the height of 18 feet off of whatever the grade is on that part of the property, there's sort of an additional level of review sometimes, and that's what can kind of hold things up. So some people may elect to make a house lower to the ground, like or whatnot, and not going to allow the process to happen a little bit quicker. That's it.
Yeah, and that is very important. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Skylar. It's when people want to speed through this, knowing where you're pushing the envelope and where you're not is key. Yes.
So if you had a lighthouse that had, let's say, 25-foot ridge from the ground, and you wanted to build light to light, would you have to go through that process if it was a?
No, existing non-conforming conditions are essentially being allowed to be maintained in the rebuilds.
Is that the same for zoning?
Yes, as far as I know. Again, I don't have a planner here with me today, and you're getting into some questions that are going more into the planning area than the building area. Skylar's coming around. Maybe you can help with that.
This piece of paper, which is sitting over here, will be very helpful sort of in a flow chart of telling you guys stuff about the height and whatnot. Okay?
Yeah, so if everyone didn't see that, there's a color sheet with some flowchart bubbly stuff on it. It's on the left side of the table, right over there where Skylar's standing. Anyone interested in that question, please make sure. Okay, and then while Skylar's passing those out, let's just take the next questions from the front row.
On the 10% of the rebuild, is that 10% of the total square footage or 10% of the upstairs or downstairs?
That's the total square footage. And there's a thing with basements being considered exempt, but you need to talk to a planner about that. So there is, I guess, an opportunity to add a basement and still be able to go pretty quickly through the process.
The thing about a basement is that part of it's exempt and part of it is not. So make sure that you pay attention to how that's calculated when you're advising your clients. Talk to your architect.
I have a two-part question, Edward.
Yes.
When it comes to the power, in order to get an release, are you guys requiring an engineering or as CC10s can pull the permits?
We are asking for a plan check in cases where there's damage on the customer side. So say, your wiring all burned up and we want to know how you're going to wire whatever it is you want to energize. It doesn't need to be a complicated plan, but something, put on paper for our plans examiner to take a look at so we understand what you're doing is going to meet code.
And then when it comes to rebuild or repair a house, does it always have to go through the architect or as its contractors can actually put some drawings together?
So it depends on which piece. A home can be designed by a non-licensed person as long as it's less than 3 stories and, light frame built construction. Normally what we see is at least some structural engineering is required. So the home designer is often going to deal with sort of the look of it, the height, the size, the location on the lot, and then the structural engineer is going to help you with your foundation design and the structure itself. So that's for a ground up replacement. If you're just repairing portions of a building, you might fall under our type 5 requirements. And we have a type 5 construction sheet that's here with us. Your contractor may be able to just do repairs under a type 5 scope.
One last question. Can the existing plans work for new permits or do they have to be revised?
Good question. So all replacement buildings need to meet current code, and this is important. You can't just build a house, a 1962 house to the same plans that were approved in 1962. We need that to meet the current code so we can issue building permits that meet the code in effect right now. Yes, on the end.
Can you elaborate on coastal and what triggers there are for when coastal applies?
Sure.
Applies to the whole city.
Skylar, you want to take this one?
Or I should say when they don't.
I mean, I think there's so many questions that everybody has, like, hey, I got this house that was built in 1960 and I want to rebuild the same house, right? We want the homeowner or the owner to be able to rebuild that house as quickly as possible, but the caveat is that it can't be built the same way that it was built in 1960, and we all know that. We want these homes to be built safer. All of Malibu is in a high wildfire area. There's not a place in the city that's exempt from burning down. So take that into consideration when you're both looking at the design of the rebuild and advising people and the building materials that you're using. So in California, right? We're very concerned about energy consumption, right? In a wildfire area, so many homes burn, these homes burn usually from the inside out, right? I used to work with Red Trunks as a lifeguard for LA County Fire for a while. And it's in being and watching homes burn down during the situation, the saddest thing was when homes were burning on, Sunday or something, right? After the fire had gone, because someone had a big stack of firewood right up next to the house, or they left the skylight open on the house and, it was windy and the neighbors had a palm tree that was 60 feet in the air and it was blowing and embers flew, a mile away, got in the house, started a fire, and the house burned from the inside out. So focus on designing and building a house that's completely sealed, right? I see sort of this as an opportunity for the community to build safer homes and be an example for a lot of other places that are in high wildfire areas throughout California, right? So we need to focus on that and make sure that these houses are designed that way. And I think that that's really important. Your question about coastal, the city recognizes that a lot of things in Malibu get built without permits. We understand that. We need it to be all built with permits. And we watched a lot of structures go down where people built things too close to a property line, or they added something later and it wasn't done to that standard. And it's really important for our community and for our neighborhoods to be safe. And as they get rebuilt, that's the staff and the community's focus. Like the planning process, our city has very stringent regulations in regards to planning, zoning, and all that stuff. And come and ask the staff a question. Like that's what they're here for during the week. It's very important, to give your client the right information, right? Like the CSLB is there is to ensure that the homeowner gets built what they're paying for, right? Their job is to make sure that they get a good, finished, properly done product. Well, in our community, we want it done to a very high standard because we want it to be safe. We want next time there's a fire, or, there could be a fire next week here. There could be a fire today, right? We want to have less damage and people to be safer.
Yeah, so just to follow up, Chapter 7A of the building code, our very high fire hazard severity zone applies here in Malibu. And so all those requirements for boxed-in eaves, special vent screens, all of that is applicable. Ignition-resistant siding, all that's going to be checked in plan check. So we'll be looking for that. That's a perfect example of what we mean when we say it has to be built to today's standards. But likewise, the energy code requirements, new installation requirements are applicable. Your window sizing, glazing type, all of that is all plan checked as well. And then back to coastal, our local coastal program, it is a very complicated program. People normally are going to hire a planning consultant or an expediter who's experienced working with the city's program to go through it. And that's not to say we don't want any newcomers to do it, but it is a very complicated, specific process to the city. Even the city's policies on planning and interpretations of the local coastal program change over time. So it's the more experience you have working with the city on that, the better. As a contractor, I think the best thing you can really do is steer your client toward an architect and or a planning consultant who really understands what these coastal requirements are.
And I would just add to that one thing, maybe for someone that's not as experienced, is to download and pick up a planning document from the city or go to a planning commission meeting and read through the document, right? Read through how a project gets approved that's a new home. So sometimes it can be super overwhelming. I know our planning commissioners get a packet. It's about 1,500 pages sometimes, and that's all the sets of plans for a job. And there's a lot of requirements there with that. We're where the mountains meet the sea, right? We got tall mountains behind us that are major wind tunnels, and we have a beautiful, beautiful Pacific Ocean in front of us. So we have a lot of visitors here, and
things get to go under a microscope.
Yeah. So it's really difficult to give you a complete answer to that question because it's so broad. But
Is the fast track permitting exempt from coastal?
yes, that's the
So
key
if you're
point.
fast track, if you're not, then you're just in the normal system anyway.
Right. Right.
So
Correct.
But your fast track is exempt from coastal.
Yeah,
Right.
it's Andrew's touched a little bit on like the building footprint, right? People go and start trying to like move too much stuff around. And my suggestion to you is to really stick to the what's called the administrative planning review with the additional 10% and stick to that footprint, right? If you're going to move something on the house or change it in the way where you're going to give more clearance maybe on one side. Like maybe right now the house is I grew up on Point Doom, right? So I'm really familiar with that area there. So I got a single family ranch house on Point Doom, right? And it was built under a standard where the side yard setbacks used to be a lot narrower, right? It's a much different standard now. So if I'm going to go and alter that existing structure and go for my APR, maybe the smartest thing for me to do is to give myself a little bit more clearance on that zone and make the other part of the house bigger. You understand sort of what I'm saying with that? And you can't always meet the new standard, but our staff is here to work with you guys to get to that goal.
Yeah. And then I do want to attempt to just mention a few of the triggers that would kick you from the rapid process into a coastal development permit. It would be things like height, total square feet, building on slopes, and encroachment into environmentally sensitive habitat area.
Which we have a lot of.
So, there's maps that the planners can show you as to where that is and whether your property has any of it on it. But important things to be aware of as you're designing a rebuild to be cognizant of where those triggers would be hit.
I would just add to that also, like when you come into the planning department, and some people may want to do this or not, a lot of our homeowners here are obviously they're dealing with a lot of stress and that stuff, myself included, right? But if you can bring the person sometimes through that process and they can hear it from a planner, like, hey, this is how it's going to work. I find that that's been really helpful to a lot of our residents. When they've come in, right, with themselves or with their contractor, their architect, that's really helpful to them.
The question is, if you have a 2,000 square foot house, the concrete slab's staying, tested, everything is staying. And to give us better clearances, shifting the house over maybe 3 feet to the right, giving us, an 8-foot setback instead of that 5-foot setback. Is that evading into that 10%?
Well, 10% would be an additional thing, but it could. So I said, it's site specific, right? So let's say in what he's talking about, when we're talking about 10%, so I have a 2,000 square foot house, right? I can do an APR and now get 2,200 square feet, right? So I want to make this a little shorter and then that a little bigger, right? Before you go through the entire process of spending thousands and thousands of dollars on that, go in with that plot plan before you go down that rabbit hole. Too many people go down that road, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Maybe they're working with someone that doesn't really understand it entirely, or they just are always used to being told yes. Malibu's notorious for that. No shortage of opinions here. I say that with a sense of humor. But we would just want to get you guys the best answer, and we want to give you as contractors the best tools to provide your customers, or yourself if you're a homeowner, builder.
Right, and you can walk into City Hall any day of the week and set up a pre-design meeting to sit down with the planner and go through that. But in general, sliding the building over and you're close to the same location, we are accommodating those, with no penalty. Sir.
I've heard the process of expediting, fast tracking, all of that. Given that 460 homes have been lost here, what resources have you been able to muster to increase the obvious flow that's happening to service that need? I mean, to me, I'm really concerned about the length of time it takes, start to finish, even if you have that fast track option. If you've got the human resources behind that, both in terms of inspection and in terms of plan check.
Yeah, I can answer that. So on both the planning side and the building safety side, the city's hired additional consulting contract capacity to bring additional planners in, plan checkers in, and inspectors in. I will tell you that as of right now, we have not seen the surge. We have contract staff waiting, chomping at the bit to get going, and we don't have that in, but we are ready to go. We're ready to jump on it immediately as soon as the surge hits.
That's the second part of my question. Of the 460, how many people have yet to apply for replacement?
I think it's the large majority.
425.
So it's just a process of getting the paperwork.
Yeah, I think that people like I'm out in the community all the time. People are talking. I'm on a job site. 3 or 4 homeowners will walk up. Skylar, what way we're working through this. And I think that, like I said, when people come in and they talk to the staff, they're like, "There's amazing resources here for me to help get to that goal," right? And then, just one thing on the power stuff, we're working towards getting and requiring almost everything to go underground. So I know that that's sort of like an initial thing. Like, let's say we're not going to issue temp power for a site until you have permits, right? But be thinking and wearing that hat of this is going to be going underground and where's it going to be going? And maybe even when I do my temp service, right? I'm running larger conduit now underground, right? So I don't have to go and rip up everything later, putting that on a smart, intelligent part of the site so that I can then transfer that over into the new home or permanent panel when we get there. And then also to know that I'm speaking more sort of as an electrician right now, but I think it's helpful for people because these are things that I get when I'm working here. People are using electric vehicles. There's a reason why Tesla put a shop in Agoura just to service vehicles, because there's a very, very high concentration of them. And there's only going to be more of them. So when you go to Edison and you go through that process, you can get 2 meters, 1 for EV at a lower rate, right? So, help advise your clients because as we, a lot of these homes are built for the future and that's important.
Yes, and Julie's standing on the side there holding up our handout on restoring power, and we have a procedure for it. So if you haven't picked that up already and you're going to be involved in doing that, please do.
The single loop process. So you're 10% or less, all your ducks in a row. How long is that process going to take through the plant?
That is sort of the $50,000 question, but
it could be higher than that.
It will be as fast as possible because you're eliminating one loop. And people always ask this. It really depends on your design professionals and your design team being able to get it right, either get it right the first time and anticipate the requirements and design to meet them, and 2, being responsive. So if you get a correction sheet back,
get it corrected.
Read it carefully. If you don't understand the question, go and ask. We get oppositional designers who think the correction, isn't right, and anyone's entitled to ask about it.
The
But
clock just starts spinning. We did it, Sebastian, as you know, I did an administrative plan review before the fire a few years ago on a home that my family has, and the permitting process for that really only took 6 months, which is very short in Mount. But that's because we did an APR and it was over the counter. And the reason why it took that long is on us. It wasn't on the staff. It was because we lagged on stuff or we changed things.
Right. And so to get to your question, each of these agencies has essentially a 10 working day turnaround. So when you go to geology, you're going to get your comments back within 10 days. When you go into building plan check for architectural, structural, and energy review, 10 working days turnaround. When you go to public works to look at your drainage system, 10 working days. Environmental health, same. But are all those 10 days going to be happening at the same time? And depending on how many loops, you see why when you're lining up every possible outcome to your question, it's impossible to say. But I think it's reasonable to get through the process in 3 months if you have a good design team that's hitting all the points right.
Yeah, you're going to go through at least one check. I'm trying to give my clients the realistic, the best, the longest. Like you said, you get a designer, they want to do something stupid, I would say.
We won't quote you on that.
And
We call it unique.
You're advising them not to do it because you want to keep them in that single loop, keep the flow going, you know. The basement conversation is the biggest potential, I think, for people to increase their square footage.
Yeah. Well, in the past, the longest delays have happened in the planning stage before you get to plan check. So what we've done is taken that planning stage and compressed it. If you're doing this like kind, you'll hear the word planning verification. Those two mean the same thing. You're cutting out what was 2/3 of the delay. The plan check process has always been quick in Malibu and will continue to be. Okay, I'm going to go to the second row now, and I'm going to work my way back. So if you've had your hand up for a long time, I apologize. I'm just trying to do this somewhat systematically so I can get to everybody. And then what time do we want to get back to the contractors presentation?
These are important questions.
Okay, it's 11:26 now, so let's be mindful of time. Will you just flag me when you want to take it back? Okay, sir.
I just need some clarity. If your project has been deemed to be of like kind, and you've upgraded to current codes and fire safety, are you exempt from coastal commission review?
I think it's important to know that any project in the Malibu and can always get, we're not going through full coastal review with that on the kind of project that you're describing. But if something were to get approved, it can always get a council decision. So you have planning commission, which you're bypassing, right? Because we're going to staff level. But if you had a new project, right? Or let's say the homeowner says, hey, forget the 2,000 square foot house. I want a 3,500 square foot house and I'm starting fresh, right?
That's coastal review.
That will only go to everything can eventually get appealed to the coastal commission after even the review process and that. If you didn't like the decision you got from the council, which would only happen after an appeal from the planning commission.
Sir.
Yeah, it seems like given the majority of all the surge in the system is going to be the fast track, the people that are, some of my clients want to rebuild completely. Are you separating all the workloads you need focusing on? I'm looking at the fast track. What about people that actually are going to go through the full process? Are you hiring extra people that come in, extra specialists?
We do. So there's a separate track for rebuild projects, even those that are going through the longer process than the fast track.
Okay.
And additional staff being hired to handle that. Contract staff.
There's no hearings, right? There's no hearing. We have to come here.
Not unless you want one.
Well, I'm just saying, there's no hearing process, right?
Like Andrew said.
Okay.
The water flow, we have to upgrade for the water flow.
That's a question that you're going to have to talk to the fire department about. It depends where they are. There's a couple areas in the city that's a little iffy, but most of the other areas, you're not going to get the same water meter when you go from a 2,000 square foot house to a house that's much larger than that. And remember that a lot of the new houses have to be fire sprinklered, right? So you have to be able to meet those standards.
Right. So fire department's one of these agencies that you need to see, as I said earlier, and you need to see them early and understand what they're going to require. Most of the houses are going to have sufficient fire flow, but there may be some pay-in requirements for infrastructure upgrades. That's part of their system of improving their capacity in the community. So I have time for one more question, and I'm going to go.
You're right. The water flow's changed a lot, and we've had a bunch of questions at our city council about this. Okay, the fire department has actually put a staff person here at the city. I forget what days of the week that they're here.
Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8 to 12:30.
Please come in with that address of the property and ask them specifically, because like I said, there's so much variability in the city. For the most part, they're working with every homeowner to get the driveway the size that it was or whatever, and where they can do it wider, they do it wider. If they can't, they very much understand that and recognize that. And we also very much recognize that your water main is not designed to fight a wildfire. Your water main is designed to handle a small or a single family structure fire, not a 14-mile long fire front bearing down on your city at once, which is what happened here.
Okay, so you've been waiting a long time.
House was built in 2007, 2008. Would they still have the plan on fire somewhere?
We may or may not, but definitely come and ask, put in a request for our records, and if we have it, we'll get it to you. All right. Awesome. Okay.
All right, thanks, Jim. And of course, we'll be around. We did want to touch on it, have a couple of our other speakers come speak to you. We'll be available afterwards as well for more questions as we do have time here. Obviously, from the nature of the questions, I'm guessing that all of you contractors are really established and have the business running the way you want it, because we did want to spend a little time talking about some of the structural things on your business itself, whether it be you may be looking to hire a home improvement salesperson to go out and pitch business for you. You may be looking to add employees. So we wanted to spend a few minutes, talk about that part of it, do a little bit lighter on our presentation, and answer questions. So we're making sure we're talking about the kinds of things you want to hear about. I don't see our representatives from the county here, so we're going to move past them for now. And we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the license requirements. Dana D'Onofrio from our Contractors Board, it can address issues about license classifications, if you want to add a home improvement salesperson, any of those kinds of questions, Dana.
Hi, good morning. So there's a lot of different licensing requirements, but as most of you are already contractors and you have your classifications, if you needed to add an additional class, it is a $150 fee, and you do have to show that you have the experience, again, 4 years experience within the last 10 years. There are some waivers that could be applied, but it is it's going to be particular to your situation and what classification you held before. So if you have an A or a B, it's a very distinct possibility that you could get a waiver depending on how related the classification that you want is to the one that you have right now. Also, if you have a corporation and someone needs to be replaced, you want to replace your qualifier, as long as that license was in good standing for 5 of the last 7 years and that person was listed on that license, it's a possibility a supervisory waiver could be issued for that person. Again, it will be a determination once you send in that classification change if you are going to get that waiver or not. And it's pretty straightforward, but we can always help you through that process. If you need to change your business name or your address, we do have a guideline at the board that's internal that your classification, if you have a single classification, does have to meet the criteria with your business name. So if you were Joe's Engineering, you couldn't say Joe's Painting or Joe's Painting and DBA Joe's Engineering. We do have a couple internal processes, but it's pretty easy, and we're very helpful. We try to be there for you so that you can be licensed and have what you need to perform what you need to do. Home improvement salespeople, if anybody has any or are thinking about it, they're allowed to go outside of your normal business facility and sign documentation to have people come or to have people buy your service. So it is an $83 fee. They do have to, the individual has to register with us as a home improvement salesperson, and then you as the contractor would have to associate them with your license. There's no fee to associate them with your license. There's no fee to take them off of your license. But anytime they work for you and they are going out and selling your business or selling contracts that aren't at your establishment, then they have to be licensed. So we are carefully watching that. And it's a very easy process. They do have to go through filling out the application. They will have to fingerprint if they haven't been fingerprinted with us already. They do have to clear the background. And then from there, it's a pretty fast process to get them established with your license. We also, if you have read our law book, within 90 days, if you're changing your address or your business name, you do have to notify us. We do have paperwork. It is for free. If you want to order an additional wall cert or a pocket card, that is a $12 fee per each one. Again, the process is fairly easy. It is the law that we need to be updated where you're at, what name you're using, is it acceptable? And we brought a couple of those forms here so that if you needed to do anything like that, you could fill it out. You could give it to me. I could have it processed. Very easy. And then I know we're going to have somebody from State Fund come and talk, but if you have workers' comp and you have employees, you have to have workers' comp on file with CSLB. So it's nice that you have your certificate out in the field and you're showing your people who have hired you. However, it does have to be on our system, whether you have an exemption, you have workers' comp, or if you're using a leasing agency, that still has to be on file with us. So it's just very important that you have that. We are a consumer protection agency. So although we are here for the contractor and helping you through your processes, we also have to protect the consumer and make sure that you have what is required of you from the board. I haven't been in a couple units, so if you have any questions about maybe renewing your license, adding a classification to your license, changing your address, your business name, adding officers, I can help you through that. I do have a couple business cards with me, and I'd be more than happy to help you if you need anything.
Thanks, Dana. I would say too, is if you haven't made a regular habit of it, is periodically go to our website, check out your own license, make sure everything that's on file there is correct, that we've got the name right, spelled right, we got the address right. Also be aware of what your expiration date is, especially if it's a situation where you've moved. Why Dana said it's so very important is about 60 days before your license expires, we send you your renewal paperwork. If we don't have your right address, it goes to wherever your old address was. You may not get that. And if you have a lapse in licensing, the laws stand behind the consumers. You may lose the money that you would have for any job that you're doing while you're not licensed. So it's real important you're on top of that, know what your expiration dates are for your license, and you're staying on top of that. Now, our next presenters, we are going to talk a little bit about workers' comp. So whether it's one of the things, as Dana said, you either have to have an exemption on file with us or have your workers' comp policy information. So you may be thinking about adding it or may have some questions about your workers' comp policy. Our next speaker is Todd Workman from the State Compensation Insurance Fund. That is the largest workers' comp company in the state, not the only one. So this is not a sales pitch for State Fund, but it is some good information. And now we'll give you a sales pitch for State Fund.
Yeah, exactly. Good morning. My name is Todd Workman. I'm glad to be here. I just want to share a few things with you about workers' compensation. If you don't already, I'm just curious, how many of you already have workers' comp? Okay, so you know a little bit about it, and how many are thinking about getting it? All right, so I'll try to tailor my remarks to that. But I do want to tell you a little bit about State Fund. As Rick said, State Fund is the largest. It has been for quite some time. We've been around for 105 years. Workers' compensation became mandatory back in 1913. We became in existence in 1914. So we've got a lot of experience. We're moving in a different direction. We got a lot of new technology coming out. We're able to cover whatever your needs are. If you look in your packet, we included some information about safety services that are available. A lot of these safety services, you can just go on and self-service. They're available to everybody, whether you have a policy with us or not. So take advantage of that. If you want to keep your employees safe, obviously if your employees get hurt, it's downtime for you, it costs you money. There's the whole stress of trying to work with that and deal with that, and that's not an easy thing to do. We're trying to minimize that stress for you, but anytime you have a claim, and I know you've had car accidents or whatever the case may be, you know what that's like. So it's just not the greatest thing to do. So prevent those claims if you can. I think it's the best thing to do. State Fund, again, has many seminars we do for free. So, get in contact with your broker. A lot of our brokers, we try and keep them aware of what's happening. The different seminars we do, whether it's illness prevention, ladder safety, trenching, all the different things that we're able to do that would be related to your industry. Take advantage of those. Many of them are open, again, to the public. So we see it as our duty not only to provide for our policyholders, provide for California employers. So take advantage of those. It's just a great opportunity for you. One thing I do want to share with you too is even though we have state in our name, we are in the unique position of being a nonprofit public entity, which means we do not take tax dollars. Right? That's a common misconception that we hear out there. We are fully funded and self-supported by our premium dollars. So it's our goal to service our policyholders the best possible way we can. And so if you ever have an issue, if you happen to be with state fund, if you have needs and you need something to reach out to, you can reach out to me. I can give you my business card. You can reach out. There's plenty of phone numbers online that you can find where you can self-service as well. So just I welcome you, ask you to do that. The other thing we put in here is just some exclusive policyholder benefits. Just talks about different things as far as claims handling, account access, all the other features that are available to you. If you don't know, and I'll just throw this out very quickly and then I'll ask questions. The workers' compensation system is now I'm forgetting the terminology, but basically you only have one remedy, single remedy, right? And so if you have an employee that is injured, that's their only case secure issue. Obviously, if there's other issues involved, they can pursue other legal means, but it's there to make sure that you are secure, make sure that you take care of your employees, and that you don't have to worry about that, right? So if they get injured, guy falls off a ladder, breaks his neck, you're covered. I mean, that's the most important thing, right? And also getting them back to a place in society that's useful. Any questions about, workers' compensation or independent contractors? Yeah.
Do you have a minimum annual premium?
We do, and it varies depending on what type of business you're in. So construction, I'll just throw out a number. It could be anywhere between $850 to $1,500.
Well, the maximum is $1,500.
That would be the minimum charge.
Maximum minimum.
Yeah, right, exactly. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you do an audit, what percentage on $100 on, say, a carpenter?
Okay.
Is
So carpenter is one of those classifications that we call dual wage classifications. And the reasons they're dual wage classifications is they anticipate that those employees that are carpenters that have more experience are being paid more, right? So let's say the guy that's making $30 an hour as a carpenter, he's probably been doing it a while, and that's why you're paying him well. The guy that's making $15 as a carpenter probably hasn't been around as long, probably doesn't have the experience in the field maybe to prevent accidents. So there are different wages and rates for those. And I don't know those numbers off the top of my head.
the journeyman though, the journeyman carpenter, what's that, 30 or 100?
Oh, it's lower than that. Yeah, the rates actually currently right now, the pure premium rates, which is kind of the starting point for workers' compensation, they're on par with what they were in the late 90s. So the rates are dramatically lower than they have been. They're down 40% from 2014. So it's taken a good turn. A lot of the legislation that's in place now is working. It's saving money. We're closing claims faster. There's some good medical provider networks out there that know workers' compensation and can help you out. Get that when you have an industrial injury, they know how to treat that. They know how to get people back to work faster. So we support that, and we have a huge medical provider network ourselves. I'm sorry I didn't answer your question completely. I don't know the rates off the top of my head. But let's say the one rate may be $35 for the lower paid individual, and then the other rate may be $50, roughly. If I was just throw out a number, I guess. Yeah.
As you probably know, in the auto insurance business, you can now buy what you need for specific timeframes. Is there such a thing as a project-specific short-term policy? For example, maybe you have a project where you need to hire a security person for 3 months.
Sure.
And otherwise, you don't have any employees, but you want to protect the asset.
You absolutely can do that. We write a policy for a year. As soon as you don't need anymore, you just cancel the policy. That's just the way it works. There would be a minimum
So
involved.
it's a prorated situation.
No, it would be a minimum premium in that situation. So let's say the minimum premium is $600.
Okay.
For that situation.
Okay.
And you don't exceed that based on the payroll and the class rate.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, and I'll answer your question in a second, but the other thing I'd say about the workers' compensation industry, specifically related to construction, is it's pretty easy to tell who's an independent contractor. So, I mean, that comes up quite a bit. If you don't have a license, you're not an independent contractor. So if you're a general and you're hiring subcontractors and they don't have a license, they're your employee. It's as easy as that. Yes.
When I was driving up a little bit south of here, I saw some type of dating service available over here, just to the south of the driveway.
Yes.
What type of concerns do we have when we pick up an dating?
Well, you're putting yourself at risk. You're putting your business at risk. You're putting your family, your home, you're putting everything at risk, right? Because as soon as they have a claim, and if you don't have workers' compensation, it's going to go a different direction. You won't have the sole remedy of workers' compensation insurance to fall back on anymore. It's going to be whatever civil case they can bring. There isn't an uninsured employer's fund, right? But they're going to ask you to contribute to that, to make up for whatever they have to pay. So they're going to try and make the injured employee right, but they're going to ask you to make it right with them.
We can't add them like on the same day.
Well, you can absolutely, but it's not that simple typically to get a policy. Yeah, it's a tougher process. I would say that if you're considering getting somebody and you think it's only going to be for a day or two, you might consider a temp agency. That would be my suggestion. A temporary temp agency. Yeah.
How do you gauge the charge for the insurance? For instance, if I have a helper or two helpers or three, at some point I have them digging, some points I have them cooling wire, some points I have them tidy pipes. What is the kind of coverage that people requires?
So if you can't separate, if you can't show that they were doing these different elements throughout the day, that allow for different classifications, some higher, some lower, then it's going to go into the highest rated class. So it's incumbent on you to keep good records and make sure that you're identifying what their work is. So when you go out and bid a job, maybe that's the way you manage it. You have 4 hours, I'm going to be doing this, 4 hours, I'm going to be doing that. And that's how you kind of keep back into what your labor is doing. But I think that's the best way to accomplish it. Yeah.
So one thing, a couple of you guys had asked about laborers. There's a labor exchange that's right down here via the public library. So that's like the city's perspective on what the most legit place is to get labor, which is right down in the parking lot of the county building, right down there. While they're reconstructing the college and adding the sheriff's office, there's a place right down there that's open during the week, and you can always find great labor there.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're covered by some sort of workers' compensation,
Exactly.
right? So that eliminates any worry for you. I did have another question over here.
Minimum term was a year.
We write a policy for a year, but if you don't need it for a year, then you can cancel the policy. Yes.
On the employee issue, as a subcontractor, if they have a license, then they're not susceptible to being audited as your employee. Don't they also have to have a workers' compensation insurance policy for their employees?
Well, so the first thing we're going to look at is whether they have a license or not. Second thing we may look at is if they have workers' compensation. If there's a belief that the work that, let's say it's a $300,000 job, and you're saying that this guy, is the only person on the job, that, we're going to probably look to see if they have workers' compensation at that point. And audits, as far as auditing, we talked about this a little bit. Typically, what you're going to do is you're going to report your payroll and your premium to us. It's going to be self-service, basically, and then there will be audits, based on randomness and requirements by the legislation. So that gives you an idea of what it's like. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Todd. We've got just a few minutes left, so I'm not going to go into a lot of depth in the little handouts. We thought that was better than a PowerPoint, so you can take the materials with you. I'm going to cover just a couple things that are on page 7 of this to let you know a little bit about enforcement and some of the ways that we're involved. Obviously, the workers' comp issues that we're just talking about, that is a big issue. So if we do get a consumer complaint filed, one of the things that we take a look at is if this job was done by workers, and if so, did the licensee have a workers' comp exemption on file, or do they have a policy in place? If an exemption's on file and there's evidence of workers, then that potentially could be discipline on your license, amongst everything else that may or may not come out of that complaint. So it's an important thing. Many of the district attorneys around the state also have special grants from the Department of Insurance that allows them to prosecute workers' comp violations. So also, you do want to have a workers' comp policy if you have employees, but you also want to have the right workers' comp policy. You don't want to have them classified as office workers if they're out there working in the field, because that gets you into a whole area that's called premium insurance fraud. And so there's potentials for felony charges in that. And a lot of the DAs have money allotted to people, and they have some staff allotted specifically to workers' comp prosecutions. So be careful if you go down that road, because you may go down something where you think short-term saving money is going to be a good deal, but it's not. Other things I wanted to touch on is areas that we see complaints and ways to help protect yourself. One of them is with mechanics liens. We have a lot of information on our website. We also do have the release forms. So you want to utilize those as best as you can. It's a very complex thing, the whole issue about mechanics liens, but be sure you're up to speed on that. Use the release forms when you're able to. As far as investigating, one of our goals too is to try to keep the playing field as level as we can for all of you who do have a license. Part of that is going after unlicensed contractors. And we do need your help, and we encourage your assistance in doing that, because you're out there in the field every day. We do conduct periodic sweeps and sometimes actually even undercover sting operations through the fire area. So as you guys are out there doing the work and you're coming across people that you see doing jobs or bidding for jobs and you don't believe that they're licensed, we would encourage you to get that information to us. And as much information as you're able to get to us, if you see a flyer posted somewhere, as you all know, you're required in any advertising to have your contractor's license number in your ad. So if you're seeing things out there where people that don't have a license number in it, you see a truck parked on the side of the road, it looks like they're doing work in front of a house or on a property, you see that they got Joe's Handyman, and you don't see a license number on there, we'd encourage you to, if you're able to and it's safe and you're not jeopardizing yourself, take a picture of that, get us the information, the date, the location you did that. If nothing else, that's going to put them into our file to set them up potentially to bring them out to a sting operation. In some cases, we may be able to take actions based just on that information you provide us. So please, and on the sheets here, you see a phone number, you see an email address where you can send us pictures, you can send us information. We'd encourage you to help be our eyes and ears out there when you're coming across that. We'd also encourage you, as you're able to, if you know of either homeowners who have properties or anybody who would want to be involved in allowing us to use a property for a sting operation. That's typically the most difficult part about doing an undercover sting, is getting the location of property. So if you're aware or have any connections and are interested in helping us out, and we do pay for properties, so we can get the homeowner a little bit of money for that. So if that's something that you've got the possibility of doing that, we'd encourage you also to get a hold of us. The other information I'm really not going to go into a lot of details on, but you'll see them in the packet, talk about the debris removal. And there's still debris removal. There's the opt-in program, which Cal Recycle is overseeing, but there are homeowners who are out there still looking to do the debris removal themselves. So we have a sheet on there. It shows which license classifications are allowed to do that work. So if you don't have one of those and you're looking for debris, that might be something you might want to consider adding your classification. On page 11, there's information on bonds. A $15,000 surety bond is what you're required to have. All of you who have a license have that with us. There are other optional bonds that you might want to consider as you're looking towards jobs performance bonds. We also give you a little bit of insurance. The workers' comp that we talked about earlier, it's required. General liability is not required in the state. We encourage and we promote to consumers that they should look for contractors who have general liability insurance. So if you don't, you might want to think about the business decision. Again, it's not required by law, but it may very well be a good investment for you to undertake and to have that in place.
Many homeowners out here also will require an additional level of that to the higher amount. A lot of the homes out here are
Right. Yeah. And so I guess the key is, and as you're looking where we see the problems is when there's a breakdown in communications, make sure you got everything in writing. Don't leave anything up to he said or she said, or I thought I was getting this, you thought I was getting that. That's a lot of the complaints we get. whether, besides workmanship issues and things like that. A lot of it is things that aren't spelled out well in contracts. Make sure you have that, progress payments, those kinds of things. Just spell it out, over communicate, try to take care. We don't expect that a contractor will never have a complaint filed against them. So if it comes down and you happen to get a complaint, don't immediately, go haywire and, oh my God, I got this complaint. Obviously, it's what you do after that complaint is, and we don't always fall on the side of the consumers. We are a consumer protection agency, but we understand that a lot of times homeowners can be unreasonable and unfair to you about what they're asking for. And so you definitely want to protect yourself, get as much as you can in writing. Sir. One second.
No, just
Go ahead.
report to the city or you guys, like a lot of people, I've heard stories of people not paying people for doing work out here over the years, and report to those homeowners.
Absolutely, and that's what we talked about.
That's a whole nother part of this that's not even mentioned.
Yeah, and
Like, some guys taking advantage of someone that has some immigrant workers or something and they're not paying the guys. Like, the state wants to know that.
Absolutely, and especially, and even if it's okay to squeal on your competitors out there, because if they're breaking the rules, if they're getting an unfair advantage over you, we definitely want to know about that. And we have other partners, whether it be the Employment Development Department, Department of Insurance, a lot of other agencies we partner up with, and we definitely are interested. Dana?
Yeah. So on the LLCs, the general liability is required. Is a requirement.
Oh, thank you for clearing that up.
But just not on your sole ownership partnerships.
That's a good point. Yeah. So if you are an LLC, obviously you do have to have the requirement. But if you're sole ownership, partnership, corporate, regular corp, you do not need to have it. Might be good to have though. Sure.
So if a contractor pulls a permit and they start the job and then they withdraw themselves from the job for whatever reason, what's the best way to protect themselves with that permit? And
You talk about the best way for the homeowner to protect
No,
themselves,
the
or
contractor.
the contractor?
to submit a letter to the city withdrawing themselves as contractor of record, or what's recommended?
Yeah, I would say that would definitely be the best thing. You'd want to notify them that you're no longer the contractor of record for this job. That's another area too that sometimes when people are either they're not licensed or they try to, they don't want to spend the time it takes to work with the city. Usually we don't see that in disaster areas because there's so many steps you got to go through working with the city. But we do see people, contractors going out there and getting the homeowners to pull their own permits. We talk to homeowners, we tell them that should be the contractor's job. They're responsible because if something doesn't pass it, if it's a homeowner that does an owner builder permit, then they're on the hook for that. And also there's issues when they're hiring unlicensed people about, as I think was mentioned earlier, the only way they can do that is if they're employees. So there are lots of laws out there to help, protect them. But the bottom line is to make sure that you're doing everything you can to operate within the law and to protect yourself if things should go south for some reason.
I got one good question. What do you do when you're on a job and the homeowner hires unlicensed contractor? And you already have a contract.
So they're hiring somebody else to do other work.
Yeah, it's like, you'll be out there, you're doing a, big tear down, rebuild. Next thing you know, they've got, guys out there doing demolition or building something along what you're already doing. Or...
What I would say, do as best as you can to educate your homeowner on if they understand the risks that they're taking.
You can educate them all you want. They'll say, hey, this guy saved me $5,000 on using it.
Absolutely, but they also should realize too that if they get caught doing that, and you have to weigh whether you're going to do something to turn them in, but certainly especially the Employment Development Department, they can actually come out and they can fine them because they're operating as the only way they can do that is if they have them as an employee and have all the paperwork, the proper payroll deductions and the like. So if they're doing that, they are taking a huge risk. Yes, maybe they will think they'll save a little bit of money, but you don't know anything about the quality of the work. There's very little recourse besides maybe civil court or small claims court to go after them. So let them know that the risk, and ultimately they're going to make that decision. But if they get caught, that there's a lot of potential problems. Yes, ma'am. If they're hiring a licensed contractor, I would say the contractors board would certainly be a good place to start. Absolutely. There's the contact information. This statewide investigative fraud team I noted on there, that's their job is they do proactive enforcement focused on unlicensed contracting.
You can always send an anonymous letter to them in the mail too.
And if that job required permits, you may want to check with the building department because they are required to put a contractor's license number when they're pulling permits. So if they've done it, or maybe they've gotten the homeowner to pull the owner builder permits, and maybe something that's an issue. I know that they get disclosure forms to the owner builders when they're pulling permits, but that's another possible job. Yes.
Is there no name, then what happens then?
Well, if the homeowner pulls them themselves, they're considered an owner builder, which they're saying that they're the ones that are actually going to be doing the work.
If the permit's originally in your name?
No, well, if they're in their name, sign on saying they won't hire any unlicensed contractor.
Right.
I mean, if you're a general contractor, though, anything that happens on that property is your responsibility.
It is, especially if you've got subs. You have to remember that you're ultimately responsible for anything that happens with your subs. So obviously you want to be careful with them. It was asked earlier about workers' comp for your subs. If they do have workers, you do want to make sure that those guys are covered as well. Ultimately, and quite honestly, in many cases, if we get brought into the matter and have to do an investigation, many times we're looking, if we can't prove something for sure, we end up going after the primes because they're ultimately responsible. Any other questions? All right, Josh.
So we are out of time, but we will be around here. We're going to be here for at least the next hour. So if you have individual questions, you can come up and ask any of the folks here. I just want to thank everybody that participated today, all of you, and the Contractors State License Board, and of course the City of Malibu and Councilmember Pete. We thank you for being here. That's it.
Have a good day.
Thank you for helping me build our city.